Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the public workshop for an updated 1 hour. Oh, hey, Mark. I didn't recognize Mr. Mark, all shaved up, looking good. Okay, updated 1 hour ozone attainment demonstration. Okay, so first off, we'll do a little housekeeping. My name is Mike Krause. I'm a planning and rules manager here at the South Coast AQMD. And again, we're here for this particular workshop. So if you're seeking another workshop, it's probably located in another room. Now, as far as there's restrooms down the hallway. If there's an emergency, we've got exits all over the place. So that should be all good. With regards to your phones, if you could put them on, mute and vibrate or vibrate, so not to distract the presentations as we kind of move along here, that would be great. Okay, just so you know, for format, staff's going to do a presentation. There'll be 3 of us speaking, and then we will open up for public comments. You come up to the dais. Just important to introduce yourself, give us your name, so we know who you are, and hopefully be able to respond to any comments and questions you have for us. Okay, so why don't we start out with those at our table here. Again, my name is Mike Krause, Planning and Rules Manager.
Zorik Pirvasian, Planning Rules Manager.
Sarah Reese, Assistant Deputy Executive Officer for Planning.
Supervisors, Modeling and Inventory Development.
Megan Lorenz, I'm an attorney in the General Counsel's Office.
Great. We are also webcasting this, so I gotta look good. And if those that are webcasting and have a comment to us, Paul is going to put up the email address by which you can send your comments to, and we will get around to respond to those. It is AQMP@AQMD.gov. Okay, so let's get started here. We're good. Thank you, Paul. Okay, so back in 2016, our governing board approved our air quality management plan. As you may or may not know, our air quality management plans are blueprints of how we are demonstrating compliance with the federal clean air standards and what pathway we're going to take to get there. So there's a number of elements that are involved. When we work on the plan, we first start off with an emission inventory. We model that to kind of see where we're at in our basin to kind of determine what we need to do to meet those standards. So then we come up with a control strategy and again, rerun the models to show that demonstration. And then we fulfill a lot of other Clean Air Act requirements. We won't bog you down with that. I just wanted to give you that basic construct of how that works. And we'll be discussing that further. Again, our board approved it back in March 2017. And the plan was a real integrated, comprehensive plan. There are a number of air quality standards out there right now. Our EPA originally came up back in 1979, the one in red there, which we'll be talking about today. In 1979, came out with a standard based on a 1 hour time frame for ozone at that concentration level, 120 parts per billion. But over time, EPA started coming out with different standards. There was actually a different standard based on different times, such as an 8 hour time frame back in 1997, and then provided a standard value for that, and have continued to pass some more. So basically what we're trying to show here is that the plan was looking at how we would meet the different ozone standards. Now, we've demonstrated these before in previous plans, but this was more of like an update based upon the latest control strategy, because we recognize that when you integrate the strategies, you can actually start seeing benefits from other ozone standards, as well as maybe other pollutants, such as, for example, PM 2.5. So those are the different 5 standards we evaluated back in the 2016 AQMP. Here they are outlined again with their concentrations. Classification is basically a terminology that EPA comes up with to determine a designation. So are you a little bit out of attainment marginally, or are you a lot as an extreme? And in our case, we're extreme. That just means we're the furthest away from that standard. That means we get sort of a longer time frame. You can see the time frames for attainment on the right column there. You get a longer time frame, but you also have more requirements as well you need to satisfy. When it comes to the 1 hour, again, this was established back in 1979. This was revoked back in 1997 when the 8 hour ozone standard was established. it got caught up in a lot of lawsuits, so a lot of time had gone by, and a lot of court cases that told us what would then result and how we as an agency would move forward in complying with those. And so eventually when sort of the dust got cleared and we were still left with needing to attain, according to the courts, needing to still show attainment because we had never reached attainment for the 1 hour standard. We still needed to show that attainment. At that point in time, it was 2013, and we were given a 10-year extension. Could we prove that up? So we did we crafted a strategy that would demonstrate that we could meet that attainment. We had to, again, we're showing the end date, the statutory end date of February 26, 2023. But we ran the models at the time and showed that we could meet that in December 31st, 2022. If those that are interested, that demonstration is put in the appendix of our 2012 AQMP. So for this time around, however, what we wanted to do was we wanted to update the attainment demonstration. We're going to get into that in a little bit, what exactly the specifics and why we did that in a little bit. But when we did that demonstration, we were able to show, we weren't able to show if you just did existing rules and regs that you would actually meet that standard come 2022. So what we needed to do was come up with a control strategy. And the nice thing with the models was we were already demonstrating, again, this is why we had an integrated plan, because you were able to show that as you're trying to meet those 8 hours, those same actions, that same sort of strategy would help us meet the 1 hour ozone standard. And again, all of those modeling and any of the analysis, et cetera, to show that it's attained are all found in the plan. Okay, I'm going to pass the mic now over to Zorik, who will take it from this point.
Thank you. Okay, so I'll continue the presentation. So what we wanted to mention, just continuing on what Mike was explaining, in the 2016 Air Quality Management Plan, we did incorporate attainment demonstration of the 1 hour ozone standard. And that attainment demonstration was based on the emission inventory version that CARB released in October of 2016. So just to elaborate on the inventory portion, developing the inventory for any air quality management plan, it's really a multi-agency effort. When I say multi-agency, of course, it's ourselves, Air Resources Board, and SCAG also providing activity data, VMT information that it all comes together and eventually becomes the entire emissions inventory. Primarily, we develop the emissions inventory for stationary sources annually. Many of you know that we collect annual emissions data from our facilities that emit more than 4 tons a year of criteria pollutants. And we also develop area source emissions inventories for a number of source categories. So that's sort of our portion. And then CARB develops the off-road inventory. They update their MFAC model every few years. And again, we rely on VMT information that SCAG provides, combine that with the composite emission factors for MFAC to develop the on-road inventory. So all of that comes together and becomes the emission inventory that is used for modeling and attainment demonstration purposes. So for the version that was used for the 1 hour ozone attainment was the one that was released in October. So when we say released, it means that all the inventory comes together, we send it to ARB, and it comes back into a format that we can use for modeling purposes. We will hear later on in the presentation that there was a final version of the inventory that was unfortunately did not get incorporated into the 1 hour ozone attainment demonstration, and we'll talk about that more. But in terms of what was in the AQMP was the October version. And the attainment strategy was based on overall control strategy that was developed for the 8 hour ozone attainment. And the measures that were proposed for showing attainment of the 8 hour ozone demonstration by 2023 were relied on to also demonstrate attainment of the 1 hour ozone standard, with the caveat that we will be making adequate progress toward making those emission reductions that were committed for the 8 hour ozone. So by 2022, which is 1 year before 2023, we will achieve a significant level of those reductions by then. So we are relying on implementation of those measures that would have reductions by 2022. So the strategy incorporated both measures that AQMD had proposed, mobile source and stationary source control measures, and it also relied on CARB's control measures, both what we call defined control measures, which were either regulatory measures or incentive-based measures, as well as what we call further deployment measures, which are allowed under EPA's 182E5 provision of Clean Air Act, which allows certain level of emission reductions that are needed for attainment to be based on development of new technologies or further improvement or development of existing technologies. So Clean Air Act allows areas that are classified as extreme non-attainment for ozone to rely on those control measures. So 1 hour ozone attainment did rely on that, and again, we'll hear more about that in the next slides. So why are we updating the 1 hour ozone attainment demonstration? One, to be consistent with the final emissions inventory that was incorporated in the 2016 Air Quality Management Plan, which was actually the November version of the inventory. That version was the final version, so there was a lag between that version and the final version, and because of time constraints, we were not able to update our 1 hour ozone attainment for the final AQMP. But the final inventory that we received from ARB, which had some changes that again we'll talk about from the October version, was used to demonstrate attainment of the 8 hour ozone and the PM 2.5 standards. We also need to update the 1 hour ozone standard to address the Clean Air Act requirements. Again, because we had relied on 182E5 measures, Clean Air Act requires that 3 years before the attainment date, either those measures have to be defined and also contingency measures have to be developed by January of 2019, which is coming up, to demonstrate that adequate reductions will be available to ensure that attainment of the standards by 2022. So for those two reasons, obviously we needed to update the 1 hour as ozone attainment demonstration. And so we'll talk about these updates that we have incorporated into the plan. I will hand it over to Sang Mi, our program supervisor, who is the expert on inventory and modeling, and she will just walk you through some of the specific updates that we made to our inventory, to our attainment strategy, and also in our air quality modeling. Thank you.
Thank you for the wonderful introduction, Mike and Zorik. So now we will deeper dive into more technical aspects of this attainment demonstration. And as Mike and Zorik mentioned, there were reasons why we are doing this, and then there are major components that this updated demonstration include. And then first part is, as these two gentlemen explained, that's emission inventory. So AQMP has full series of emissions inventory categorized by major sources and included in everywhere in the AQMP, mostly Chapter 3 and Appendix 3 of AQMP are dedicated for emissions inventory discussion. However, as we briefly mentioned, the emissions inventory used for 1 hour ozone attainment demonstration happened to be inconsistent to the rest of AQMP. So as we would discuss furthermore, there was very short time period that the inventory has been updated multiple times. So that was by oversight. So inventory was slightly different. So that will be updated. That was updated in this new demonstration. Second part, attainment strategy. So our commitment of 2016 AQMP is elimination of so-called black box measures. So black box measures, that is basically articles allowed. It is basically measures allowed under Clean Air Act Article 182E5. And some of the measures that are listed in CARB's SIP strategy is called further deployment of cleaner technology is kind of fall into 182E5 category. And then in this new strategy, new attainment demonstration, we eliminated reliance on such 182E5 measures. And also, we removed any reliance, as a matter of fact, we removed any reliance any reliance on CARBS measures, including 182E5. So that translates into that 1 hour ozone can be attained only by South Coast AQMD's stationary and mobile source measures. When you do this type of inventory update and then attainment strategy update, you have to put everything into the numerical modeling and come up to the projection to future ozone concentration. So that is the third bullet, air quality modeling component. So then we talk about this inventory already multiple times this morning, and then this slide summarizes what the differences are. And it's a bit complicated to plot. Several sets of differences or pairs are here. So what you see typically when we develop emissions inventory, there are annual average emission and then also summer planning emission. When it comes to ozone, we rely on summer plannings primarily because the summer planning inventory is meant to produce maximum ozone available under circumstances. And base year is still 2012. That is kind of anchor year you develop emissions inventory and the modeling platform, and then you project from your anchor year forward. So in 2016 AQMP, the base year was 2012. When it comes to 1 hour ozone, the future attainment deadline is 2022. So here, two sets of data is 2012 base year inventory and then future year attainment deadline 2022. So we provided both the annual average and summer planning for your informational purposes, but primarily, again, ozone modeling needs to be conducted based on summer planning inventory. And then one version that the previous or the attainment demonstration included in 2016 AQMP is October 2016 version. And the November 2016 version is the official AQMP inventory, of which details are provided in Appendix 3 and Chapter 3, and then all other demonstration of PM 2.5 and 8 hour ozone. What you can see is we also listed both the VOC and NOx because those are two primary precursors for the ozone. And what you can see, the differences are not dramatic. But then let's look at this summer planning inventory. If you see VOC 2022, the difference is less than 0.5 ton, but then NOx emission has approximately 7.5 ton differences. So the official version has less NOx emission in it. And these are inventory update. And next part is attainment strategy itself. So again, we address multiple times what were included in the 2016 AQMP version versus what are included now in updated version. So the bottom line is basically the same. So South Coast AQMD is committed to show 1 hour attainment with reliance on 8 hour strategy targeted for 2023. So basically, in average, we claim approximately 86% of the commitment designed for 2023 are used for 1 hour ozone attainment demonstration that's due in 2022. And then in this revision, we removed the CARBS SIP strategy. So this CARBS SIP strategy have multiple elements, of course, but then the specific measures that the previous version of attainment demonstration relied on are small off-road engine category and further deployment of cleaner technology category. And then those are, again, it is considered as 182E5 measures, and then AQMD, and then this latest 2016 AQMP is committed to have no reliance on black box measures or 182E5 measures. So this update has no reliance on these carbon measures. Then what are actually included in 1 hour ozone attainment demonstration as summarized in this table. But then in AQMD's effort to show 8-hour ozone in 2023 already started ever since this AQMP has been adopted. And then among those AQMD, South Coast AQMD's measures, some of them have implementation date prior to 2023, even though the target commitment was primarily designed for 2023 for 8 hours. So these specific measures are listed here: CMB02, CMB03, 04, fugitive emission 01, and CTS 01, BCM10, MOB10. All these are expected to have full implementation by 2022. Some of them are even 2020, as it would be summarized in the 2 slides afterwards. And some measures listed here have expected to have full implementation in 2023. Again, all these stationary measures and mobile source measures are designed to assist 8-hour ozone demonstration in 2023, not specifically developed for 1 hour. It is developed for 8-hour ozone. So attainment full implementation 23 is original target. So for when it comes to 2022, we use the fraction or portion of this commitment for 2022. And these specific 5 measures, we took credit of only 86% of target for 86% of 2022 commitment toward 1 hour attainment demonstration. And this table summarized all the measures listed in the previous 2 slides. And then when you see here is full implementation dates by 2020, it is early implementation. And 2022 also has 3 measures. And then 2023, these 5 measures, again, portion of this full commitment for 2023 are included here as marked this footnote here. So total amount of emission reductions we included 1 hour demonstration is VOC 6.1 ton and then NOx 20.6 ton. And then now you have the updated or the right emissions inventory. And then now you have emission reductions and control measures associated with them. They are identified, and then now you employ or you include all this into numerical modeling, chemical transport model to project future concentrations. So this modeling platform has very comprehensive requirement by EPA, and then there is a full EPA attainment demonstration guidance. And then 2016 AQMP modeling platform was developed based on EPA's modeling guidance. So this modeling platform used in 2016 AQMP stays the same for the 1 hour attainment demonstration. So what's not changed in this modeling platform is base year, as we discussed, 2012 is base year. So EPA requires to have base year modeling performance to meet certain performance criteria. That includes both meteorological modeling and ozone modeling itself, and then also episode that needs to be included in the attainment demonstration, etc. So, and then also methodology, how to project base year concentration into future concentration, and then model the sensitivity to VOC and NOx emission reductions that we call here ozone isoplate. So all these modeling platforms stays identical to the 2016 AQMP. So we listed here those things stays the same. So when you include all these things into very comprehensive modeling system, it can be summarized in this simple table, even though all the process is very complicated and modeling takes like full 7 days of computational time, etc. So here are the list of stations that the measurements meets the EPA's data completeness requirement. And then the first column is base year measurement-based design value, 5-year weighted. Anything in red indicates that the station is above national standard, meaning the non-attainment. And then black ones, of course, that is below the national standard. So 1 hour, 1979 1 hour ozone standard is 125 ppb. So in order to show attainment, the concentration needs to be below 125. So in the base year, you can see this 7 stations out of 13 shows non-attainment. But then in future year, so future year column has 2. One is 2022 baseline, and the last one is attainment scenario. Baseline meaning the so-called business as usual scenario. So what that means is if you do nothing other than whatever the regulations and rules already adopted, your emission in this basin is expected to go down. That is because of turnover to the new technology as well as adopted already implemented rules. So the rule becomes more and more effective and then your emissions supposed to go down. That is baseline case, or called the business as usual case. But then as you can see here, if there is no new reductions based on new attainment strategy, then Fontana is still expected to be in non-attainment as it's written as 125 ppb. Very close to the standard. However, EPA would say no because it's still 125. You have to be less than 125. So what that means is you need to introduce more emission reductions. That's the attainment scenario we discussed in the previous several slides. So when you implement 6.6 tons of VOC reduction and then approximately 21 tons of NOx reduction, then the last column shows the expected 1 hour concentration in the future year. So still Fontana is expected to show the highest concentration in the basin, but then now this 1 hour concentration is expected to be 123 ppb, which is in attainment. So we also need to show the attainment needs to be achieved in the entire basin. And here the area color shaped with, filled with the color codes are the AQMD's South Coast Air Basin. And the color scale here is represented in color bar on the right. And this is not exactly AQI scale because AQI scale doesn't have blue. But then again, 125 is a standard. And then left side of a plot is 2012 base year measured design value. And it shows quite high concentrations in the San Gabriel and San Bernardino mountains. And the right side of plot is 2022 baseline concentration. Again, this is business as usual case. It shows huge improvement, but still, as we saw in the previous slide, Fontana is in non-attainment with 125 ppb. But then this slide shows the comparison of baseline versus controlled scenario. So the difference is very subtle. You cannot really distinguish the differences, identify the differences here. However, this controlled case is the maximum concentration 123 ppb, so it shows attainment. And then Fontana being the highest concentration, so it meaning entire basin is expected to be in attainment. So up to here is attainment demonstration, but then what step included is so-called a weight of evidence discussion. So when you do numerical modeling, there are lots of uncertainties. So EPA required to add weight of evidence. So meaning that we conducted numerous numerical tests to build more confidence and to provide more robust analysis on our attainment demonstration. So here is the selective list of sensitivity cases we performed. And then in addition to attainment case, these 4 sensitivity cases kind of allowed us to build more confidence to the result that we're presenting here. So very first case is, it is the same as attainment case, except there is more VOC reductions. However, this more VOC reductions does not come from additional control measures, but those are expected from NOx measures, concurrent VOC reduction from NOx measures. What this means is, let me jump to the next slide. So these are identifying concurrent VOC reduction. You can compare to the slides presented in earlier. But then what this have is, if you go down to the bottom line, here VOC reduction is 12.2 ton instead of 6.1 ton we presented in earlier slides. Again, this additional VOC is not coming from new measures, but these are concurrent reductions from mostly mobile source measures and then some of stationary source measures. These concurrent reductions not included in attainment case due to some uncertainties associated with estimating this concurrent reduction in especially mobile sources. But actually, but then in reality, we expect highly likely we will have more VOC reductions, and that is included in sensitivity case 1. Second one is sensitivity case 1 plus small off-road engine categories. So small off-road engine categories are mainly lawn and garden equipment. So everybody's lawnmowers and leaf blowers, etc., has real high VOC emissions because of the technology, 2-stroke engine types, and then this container sitting in your garage, and then that evaporates all the time. So those are relative sense, it can be reduced, it can be accommodated with incentive fundings, etc., to expedite turnover to the cleaner technology. So STEP performed the sensitivity for this specific category that represents a sensitivity case 2. Third one is the most conservative in terms of emission reduction. So this third case has control measures only MOB 14, that is incentive measure for mobile source categories, and MOB 11, that is again this lawn and garden equipment measures based on incentive fundings. So this is most conservative scenario in terms of emission reductions. The least amount of emission reductions are associated with this sensitivity case 3. Sensitivity case 4, the last item is, it's again based on sensitivity case 1, but this one has more test on OGV at birth and the locomotive categories that has more associated with, that has some association with goods movement and then some incentive funding opportunities here. So when you include this sensitivity, after we completed this sensitivity test, this table is summarizing what ozone responses are, or what expected ozone concentration on different scenarios are. Again, the attainment case has VOC reduction of about 6 ton and NOx emission 21 ton. And then design value became 123.5 ppb. That's in attainment. Sensitivity case 1, that has more concurrent VOC emission, that gives a huge benefit of 123.0.5 ppb benefit. Sensitivity case 2, you add more emission reductions in lawn and garden equipment, then you go down even further by 0.4 ppb. Sensitivity case 3 is very conservative, meaning that very little amount of emission reductions incorporated into. Of course, it shows a lot higher concentration, 124.5 ppb. However, based on EPA's guidance on the truncation, that is still in attainment. And the last case, we added more OGV, and then locomotive sensitivity, and then it still shows attainment. And the last column is kind of a very rudimentary representation of ozone response for emission reductions. So that is just for very quick comparison only. But then in relative, all this ozone response to emission reduction is very consistent, except a sensitivity case 2 that shows a lot bigger advantage than other category. So what this table summarizes is, especially sensitivity case 3 here is, even if there is a shortfall in our commitment to achieve emission reductions, or even some uncertainties in emissions inventory itself, there is a room to accommodate such changes, and then we are in good path to show the attainment of 1 hour ozone by 2022. So this summarizes our presentation here. So the first thing, we presenting updated analysis that shows 1 hour ozone attainment in 2022 successfully. So the key updates included in this analysis is emission inventory now being consistent to the rest of AQMP's official inventory that were used in 8-hour ozone and PM 2.5 attainment. And then this new attainment demonstration confirms that 1 hour ozone can be attained solely by South Coast AQMD's mobile source and stationary source measures. And then lastly, emission reductions from CARB's SIP strategy is no longer needed. That eliminates both defined and non-defined, meaning the 182E5 measures. So that eliminates our need to come up with the contingency measures that Zorik and Mike mentioned earlier. So all of this summarizes that 1 hour ozone can be attained successfully, but there is no new control strategy we propose here. This attainment demonstration is based on the developed control strategy for 2023 8-hour attainment demonstration. And then with South Coast AQMD's measure, this is expected to attain. This summarizes our new updated analysis. So what is expected from here is, first, as you may aware, these documents are on internet, 2016 AQMP's website for public's comments, and then comments is due by October 8th. And then we will have this presentation to the South Coast AQMD's Mobile Source Committee. That's scheduled October 19th. Of course, that is open to the public as well. And then South Coast AQMD's governing board meeting scheduled November 2nd will host a public hearing on this item. And once after that, this item will be presented in the CARB's governing board meeting. That's scheduled December 13th and 14th. And afterwards, this package will be submitted to EPA before the end of the year as a revision to this 1 hour update, 1 hour ozone of the last 2016 AQMP. So in addition to these comments that you can submit online, this is our contact information. So any comments or questions are more than welcome here. This concludes our presentation.
Great. Thank you, Sang-Mi. Appreciate that. Okay, so Paul will set up the microphone here. If we could have our first victim. I'm a speaker. All right, Dan. Oh, Dan, you can come to this one too. That's fine. Either one. All right, he's getting his exercise. By the way, again, those who are webcasting, we just put up the email address by which you can submit your comment letters, AQMP@aqmd.gov. Dan.
This is Dan McGivney of SoCalGas. I have a question, just so I understand completely.
Sure.
I lost my place here. On slide 4, on attainment demonstration, in the first bullet there, you note that the required emission reductions need to be in place by December 31, 22. And then it was noted that on slide 10 that full implementation had to be done of those control measures by 2023. Does that mean that the rules have to be adopted and emission reductions are underway, or does that mean our monitoring stations have to show compliance with the standard by the February, whatever the date was, February 31, 22.
Right. So EPA's, when they do designations, they have an effective date. And from those effective dates, that's the date, the specific day that triggers the time frame by which one, as statutorily, needs to attain. But what happens is sometimes those dates will fall like mid-year, particularly for ozone. For PM, it's at the end of the year, the Clean Air Act allows that. But for ozone, it's the actual date. So in this particular case, that statutory deadline date is in February. However, when they look at control strategies and attainment demonstrations, it's done by a calendar year. So we actually need to have those in place come January 1st, in essence, of 2022, so we can actually demonstrate by the end of that calendar year that those reductions are being met.
But I mean, do we have to have the reductions by the end of 2022? So that,
Yes.
again, the monitoring stations have to be showing we're below
Yes.
120?
Yes,
or
because we
by
use
the
that.
process date.
That's right. So
Right.
we'll use that set of data from the year 2022 to demonstrate.
So these control need to be adopted
Placed by-
fairly soon.
That's right, and that's why saying be noted of those different control measures that we're working on currently. We're trying to get those in place so we can have dates and we can start seeing achievements from those.
And this is
reductions.
great, you're showing attainment, but just in case we don't meet attainment, then that would trigger Section 185?
So actually, if we don't show that attainment, it actually triggers what's called under the Clean Air Act contingency measures, and we're actually working in parallel with those. And some of those have been set up in the plan already, and we're actually working with EPA right now
So you may
as
develop
they're
some
reviewing the
more.
plan. I'm sorry?
You're maybe developing more contingency measures other than what you may already have in the plan.
That's right.
Okay, all right, thank you.
But if I may add, so in reality, when both together with South Coast AQMD and then CARB, we need a 45% NOx reduction in 2023. So this, in reality, actual emissions reduction expected in 2022 is a lot bigger than what we present here because we are not counting on CARB's measure at all. CARB committed more than 100 ton of reduction in 2023. So emission reductions has to occur gradually. You cannot have zero emission reduction suddenly 2020. You don't expect 100 ton of reduction. So even it's some progress toward that, we would have a lot more emission reduction in 2022. So in reality, it will be lower than this one if we are going to attain 8 hours in 2023.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, next up. It could be a question, could be a comment. We're open.
Got it. David Rothbart, Los Angeles County Sanitation Districts. Following up on that last comment, I'm trying to put my head around where we're going as far as what CARB has committed for reductions. I'm thinking 1 hour and 8 hour. So if I understand correctly, for this process, for the 1 hour demonstration, you're just saying we're going to be conservative. We're not going to rely on what CARB has committed. They're going to do that, and we're expecting to get that reduction, but for this process, we're not going to count on it. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is basically correct, but the reason is, so CARB's SIP strategy has reliance on a further deployment of cleaner technology, which is basically 182E5 measures. If you have 182E5 measures, you have to come up with the contingency or show the technology development by 3 years prior to the attainment deadline. That means January of 2019, which is basically 4 months away. So for this Clean Air Act requirement purposes, we want to show the demonstration without relying on the 182E5. That is one of the purposes we are clarifying this demonstration here.
Understood. I'm sort of leading into kind of the obvious of the 8 hour standard. you got to speculate as far as how that's going, because if right now you're saying, okay, we can't rely on that right now because it's not really far enough along for this document, we have the same deadline for the 8-hour demonstration. So we're going to have a problem, the same type of problem for the 8-hour demonstration.
Right, so a couple points there. So the plan that Sammy had shown those different control measures that we're relying on the 1 hour, and you already know the schedule that we have for the 8-hour. It is true, some of those we've already achieved. For example, CTS01, which was some of the latest changes for 1168 that we passed. Our goal was at 1. We were able to achieve 1.4 come that date. It's coming up. We ourselves, you and I, are both working on the non-refinery flare, control measure. There's going to be a shortfall there. We're going to have to work that out. There's currently an RFP out right now for incentivized programs that also sort of is threaded through a number of those. We're looking to, award some of those projects, get those on their way, and seek SIP credit for those. I believe the Soon program is an ongoing program. So a number of things are happening right now, and to meet that. So yeah, we obviously have more work to do on some of those programs, and we definitely going to have to, sharpen our pencils to send back to EPA to get the necessary credits that we're seeking.
Yeah.
To meet those deadlines.
Just a couple of things to add to what Mike was saying. So there's a lot of efforts going on right now towards those reductions. Yeah, it's a huge challenge to achieve the significant level of reductions that we need to achieve by 2023. But there's a lot of work going on. CARB is in the process of developing a number of regulations right now. They're trying to quantify what they're going to get from some of these regulations. The ADBERT is currently being developed. The ICT is going to their board this month. There's a few other regulations that are coming up. We're developing our facility-based measures. So a lot of efforts going on to target 2023 level of reductions. And on top of all that is the incentive level of funding, right? We've committed to raise significant level of incentive funding over the next 10, 14 years. But we expect to get significant reductions from those funding levels that will be raised. So we're hopeful.
Right, and you're kind of set up in a difficult situation because most of the reductions have to come from CARB and EPA. I know CARB's doing their best. EPA hasn't stepped up to where they need to step up. So it's kind of coming back to, if you don't attain, you're going to do the best you can to get reductions. But how far do you need to go? How far can you go to get to attainment? And then what is a consequence? Dan talked about 185. I mean, that's kind of a consequence on stationary sources. I remember going back to Washington, D.C. to meet with Henry Waxman with Barry Wallerstein, and Barry would just say, I could eliminate all stationary sources. It won't make a dent in what we have to do. So the mobile and federal sources have to be reduced.
Yeah.
So kind of the 20,000-foot overview of us stationary sources is sort of get to the point of you have to ratchet down, but at a certain point you get rid of all of us, you're still not going to attain. So I'm trying to get into the weeds as far as we got to be reasonable as far as what we can do. And if we can't do everything, are you holding the bag as far as saying, sorry, we're going to have the penalties and stationary sources, the major sources, sorry, you get the 185 penalties, when it's not your problem. It's really CARB and EPA.
And we have been having discussions with EPA and also discussions with others back in Washington about the need to take action on a heavy-duty NOx standard, for example, recognizing that the bulk of our emission issues are associated with mobile sources. We're also thinking of kind of out-of-the-box solutions. We've been having conversations with authorities in China about collaborating on potential vessel incentive programs to get cleaner vessels to call at our ports, as ocean-going vessels will be a very significant component of our NOx emission inventory in 2023. So we're not just resting on what we know we can do within our own box, but still reaching out and seeing if we can push on that at the federal and perhaps even international levels.
You have a challenging job.
Thank you, David. Okay, anyone else? All right, our presentation was that clear and Concise, perfect. Okay, well, again, as SCAQMD said, the public comment period is still open. Just by, way of background, we are going through this whole process because, we do consider this sort of as an update or even a revision to our current plan as it goes. So we do want to get our board's approval of that. We do plan to take that to our board in November. So again, open any suggestions as far as the document is concerned. And again, always willing to answer any questions. So thank you very much for attending and have a nice day.